plank into down dog. We are going to go through a couple of key points of performance in my opinion. Coming on to our hands and knees, we're going to do a little bit of a warm-up exercise. So you're going to place your hands out in front of you and then just come into a tabletop position. With our hands on the floor, we want to form an arch through the palm, just like we have an arch through the sole of our feet. This means that we're going to want to have points of contact through the heel of our hand on the outside as well as on the inside and through our thumb. That's kind of included in along the heel, I feel, but also important to note. Then we are going to have a little bit of activation or grounding through our hands, which is going to create tension in through the fingers, and that is going to help to create that arch. Now, on hands and knees, anytime we can also play around with the position of our hands. So our fingers do not have to be facing forward. I find that it can be beneficial with a slight turnout. Of course, everyone is different. This is very similar to when we talk about squats and feet positioning. So thinking about possibly having those hands turned out a little bit and then being active through the hands and through the fingers, which is also then going to help to support the wrist. When we get into hands and knees, we want to be aware of the position of our shoulders. So when my elbow pits are turned inwards, you can see my shoulders naturally want to hike up. As I turn my elbow pits forward, I can feel that my shoulder blades want to move a little bit maybe together, and I can encourage them to go down a little bit. So we don't want to be too extreme with any of these movements. We want just as much tension as needed. So coming into this plank position with all those points, my hands are grounded, turned out a little bit. It's okay that my shoulder is behind my wrist. And if I need some support for my wrists, I could fold up my yoga mat or a towel and I can place the heel of my hand on the edge of my mat. And now it's just like when you put a lift or a wedge or stand on something underneath of your heels when you squat. So waterfall that hand off of the edge of the mat, and that is going to, like I said, raise the heel of the hand up, making the fingers lower and thus being on a little bit of a slant. So either way, wherever your hands are, come into this grounded position and then just walk your knees back. My knees are about hip width apart. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift weight over more towards my hands. And you can see that I'm in a plank position. Then I can shift out of that if I want and actually come into what looks more like a child's pose position, not as much of a down dog. And when I'm ready, I can always come back up and come into a weight-bearing position, again, more over my wrists. When I'm here, I am thinking about this as a whole body position. I am pushed up through my shoulders. I've got that arm spiral as well, so I'm grounded through my hands. My elbow pits are facing forward. And I'm actually, if you watch across the top of my back, I'm actually pushed up a little bit between my shoulder blades. This is a position that I personally feel stronger in. There's nothing wrong with having the chest down and in between. Personally, I do like being a little bit more in the middle, potentially into a bit more of a protracted position, we call it. So this is protracted. So I can be straighter here, potentially, where my shoulder or the head of my arm bone is through the center of my T-spine, that rib cage spine, or, so that's the position I'm talking about, or you can actually be pushed up a little bit, and so you can see my upper back is actually rounded slightly. And then again, knowing that you can at any point come into that child's pose position and take a moment's rest. You can be active here, reaching through your hands. And if we want to, we can move to an elevated surface to enjoy a next progression of this.